now too, but we have an incredible guest speaker and teacher with us today, and I don't want to waste any time or lose out on any opportunity for the content. So I want to offer a brief overview of the series that we're in the middle of, and let me make sure everyone's on mute here.
No, we're not.
There we go. Okay, I got you, Craig and Carol, or friend Carol. So we are in the middle of a Lenten adult formation series called Fierce Landscapes, and we are engaging in conversations about pilgrimage. So Reverend Burnett Dick led us off last week, and I think all of us now are familiar with the difference between apophatic and cataphatic. So I know those words certainly stayed with me through the week and made quite an impression. Today we have Laurie Van Balen, who her sister-in-law, Mary Van Balen, is going to introduce. And then next week, we have the Reverend Dr. R. Drew Smith, who's going to speak on reckoning of racial justice and equity. Following that week is Dr. Pat Regola, our very own, and she's going to be talking about Buddhist pilgrimage. Then we have Malcolm Cochran, who is an artist who is going to share on his exhibit about genocide called Requiem. And then I will do the final one on Palm Sunday, which is about Stations of the Cross from the Holy Land. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary Van Balen to introduce Laurie.
Thanks, Stacy. I'm really excited to be able to introduce Laurie to this community. I'm sure you will really enjoy this presentation. I just have to say, as her sister-in-law, Laurie's just been an inspiration. She and my brother, Tom, their involvement in creation of this project and how it's really blossomed over these last 4 years. Laurie is an artist, an instructor, a community organizer, an advocate for human rights. And she's the director of the Columbus Crossing Borders art exhibit and producer of the film Breathe Free, which is a documentary film connected to the exhibit. Along with her husband, my brother Tom, Laurie takes the study of human rights into classrooms and communities to engage in the many ways that we can all take positive actions to uphold equity, equality, fairness, and respect for all. So I'll give it over to you, Laurie.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here today. And thank you, Stacy, for inviting me. And thank you, Mary, for the introduction, as well as Mary's going to help me show you images from the exhibit, because if I tried to show you images, you would end up seeing all my personal files on my computer, because I don't know what I'm doing. Recently, in fact, last week, I gave a talk where I mentioned to the audience that in 1968, when I was 14 years old, two of my heroes were Mother Teresa and Robert Kennedy. And now, after that talk for the past week or so, I've been thinking a lot about Mother Teresa and Robert Kennedy and asking myself why they made such an impact on my life. Well, for one, they both spoke about love. They spoke about compassion. They spoke about equality, inclusion, social justice, and nonviolence. And not only did they speak of these things, they lived these things. In April of 1968, I'm sure many of you here remember when Martin Luther King was murdered. On the evening of his death, which was only 2 short months before Robert Kennedy himself would be assassinated, Kennedy stood before a group of people who were mourning the loss of Martin Luther King, and he said this: "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but it's love and wisdom and compassion towards one another." 48 years later, in 2016, I was sitting at my home computer with a cup of coffee, reading the latest news, and a photograph caught my eye. I saw the burned out buildings of Aleppo. I saw massive destruction. I saw the results of horrific violence. And in this photo, I saw a woman fleeing. She was clutching a baby to her chest. Her mouth was open as if in a silent, anguished cry, and the panic in her eyes haunted me. In that moment, something shifted inside of me. My personal pilgrimage deepened at that moment because all at once I felt my heart woke up and this image was no longer an image. It was suddenly all very real. The terror in this woman's life and her life and so many others, mothers, fathers, students, doctors, lawyers, working class, middle class, too many children, all families like yours and mine. And I sat there with this photo and I thought about this world we are living in. And I thought, how do we let things like this happen? I thought about the momentum, the war games, the power politics, the people who care, the people who don't care, the good and the evil. And all this came rushing to me at one time. And I thought, what is my place in all of this? I felt this urgency to do something, but what? I'm just this person in Ohio. I have no credentials for solving world problems. What could I say or do? And why would anybody listen to me anyway? And then I thought about something that Robert Kennedy said. He said, few will have the greatness to bend history, but each one of us can work to change a small portion of events. Every time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, that person sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy, this builds a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and injustice. And those eloquent words resonated in a way I had never heard them quite before. And that did it for me. I was ready to get to work on my little tiny ripple of hope. And being that I am an artist, I decided to use art as my tools. So at that time in 2016, there was a lot of talk about building walls and travel bans and these new immigration policies that were being prepared by a newly elected president and a new administration. And there was also a great deal of misinformation that was sweeping through the country about refugees and immigration in general. I was mindful that there's a lot of people then and now who are unfamiliar with the facts about refugees. And frankly, the lack of awareness and critical thinking on the part of many people concerned me then and it concerns me now. I personally knew some very, very caring people who were falling for propaganda and myths that were being perpetuated about refugees. And I felt compelled to use my art to try to create a presentation, non-denominational, non-partisan, non-profit, just an art exhibit that would reach beyond the label of being a refugee and introduce the audience to a person, a name, a face, a real human being. I wanted to shine a spotlight on our shared humanity. So I started calling fellow artists. And before I knew it, I had over 30 and a film crew. And I used this to inspire critical thinking and understanding about the hardship and devastation that people who are being forced to leave their homes are facing. And I wanted to provide that up close, intimate look into this personal human struggle to maybe give our audience the opportunity to observe, integrate, and connect. And that's what led to the birth of my project, the Columbus Crossing Borders Project. Columbus Crossing Borders art exhibit and a documentary film that was created to inspire critical thinking, compassion, and support for the millions who have been forced to flee their homes due to war, climate, violence, and persecution. The Columbus Crossing Borders art exhibit features the collective contribution of 34 artists who are responding to the plight of refugees with paintings that cross borders and connect. In other words, these artists were asked not to be territorial with their work, allowing instead for their paintings to overlap and integrate harmoniously. As the exhibit moves from left to right, each painting contains an element that reaches into the painting beside it. So you may see a figure moving from one canvas onto the next. Or maybe two paintings are being connected by an intersecting ocean or blades of grass. Or maybe the connection's being made with repetitious symbols and designs. But in whatever way these border crossings are taking place, this inspirational exhibit is the result of a cooperative community of artists, and they've created a beautiful tribute to the resilience and the strength and courage of those who've survived forced migration. Columbus Crossing Borders is in its fourth year. This project has remained nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-denominational. The art exhibit has been seen in galleries, museums, schools and colleges, community centers, and places of worship. The Columbus Crossing Borders documentary film is titled Breathe Free, and it was directed by filmmaker Doug Swift. This is a powerful film which follows the creation and development of the Columbus Crossing Borders art exhibit, intermixed with courageous stories of refugees who are now living in the United States. Breathe Free had its theater premiere in the summer of 2017 at the Drexel Theater to a sold-out audience, and the film continues to be seen throughout the country. These Columbus Crossing Borders events take place in a variety of ways. There are exhibits, there's school presentations, there's workshops, public partnerships, panel discussions, creative community projects, and to overcome the restrictions presented by the current pandemic, we also created an online presentation of Columbus Crossing Borders through a virtual 360-degree gallery tour. In this way, Columbus Crossing Borders can continue being seen by the public and the many classrooms that we visit. So both this virtual tour and our new updated website will be available to the public within the next few days. During our events, whether they're in person or online, we meet with all ages and all demographics. We share a lot of discussions and opportunities so that we can listen and learn. And during the past 4 years, I've learned something that's very startling. What I'm talking about is the vast number of people who say they feel powerless in light of the world's hardships. These are people who share their concern and compassion for refugees. They share their concerns about the horrific challenges that we're facing, such as racism, poverty, issues of social justice. But the majority of people we talk to say they don't think there's much they can do to make a difference beyond voting. A little over a year ago, right before the pandemic, I was having a conversation with a young woman who is a healthcare provider. I don't know her personally. I was in her office for a medical checkup. And during the conversation, we touched upon the advocacy work that I'm doing, which led to a comment about the difficulties and hardships that our people are currently facing in our country. And that's when she said this to me. She said, when I go home at night, I turn everything off. When I'm at home, I'm with my family, my kids, and I can't worry about what's going on in the world because there's nothing I can do about it. So whatever I'm not working, I just go into my own little bubble and I don't leave that little bubble. And when she said that to me, I didn't respond. I didn't tell her what I was thinking, but I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking that while we were sitting there in the warm comfort of her office with access to some of the best medical treatment available, that there are thousands of people who don't have access to any medical treatment, to healthcare of any kind, or even access to warm spaces to sit in for that matter. I was thinking about the people on their knees at the southern border, people who used to have homes with beds and chairs, and they had cupboards with food that they could make for dinner. And except now they don't have their homes, they don't have their dinners, they don't have their family members who have been kidnapped, tortured, and shot. And all that these people on their knees are asking for is nothing more than the opportunity to stay alive. And I was thinking about the clergy members that I sat on panels with who have been arrested at our southern border for trying to give water to refugees who had survived thousands of miles of dangerous travel, only to face being apprehended, separated from their families, and then locked in cages. And I was thinking about this young woman that I was talking to. a nurse practitioner who had probably worked very hard to get through school, to get to where she was now in her career so that she could help people through medicine. She was most likely a very caring person. But I was also thinking that we live in a world of overload, an overload of too much pain and suffering, which can feel like a huge emotional burden, especially when we're facing the issues we're facing now. And of course, it's easy to feel powerless. So we distract ourselves. And sometimes we do that by hiding inside our little bubbles. And yet, if we do care, how might we set about making things better? What's my responsibility as a citizen in this country beyond casting my vote? What's my responsibility as a human being? And I was also thinking about something Mother Teresa said. She said, not all of us can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. This helplessness and lack of empowerment that so many of us feel is one of the reasons why Columbus Crossing Borders advocacy came to expand. Because alongside our mission to inspire critical thinking and compassion for refugees, our advocacy now includes a deep commitment to human rights education. At the end of World War II in 1945, the governments of the world came together through the United Nations and they created this milestone document. Representatives from across the world with many different legal and cultural backgrounds drafted 30 articles which spell out the basic rights shared by all people. And these articles are known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These rights state that all of us, every person, is entitled to dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and peace, regardless of race, color, sex, religion, politics, origin, property. These rights belong to us just because we're human beings. The practice of these rights put love and peace into action. When we can uphold these rights, beginning in small places close to our homes, such as our neighborhoods, our schools, our offices, workspaces, places of worship, remarkable things start to happen. When we uphold these rights, that progress extends into the larger world. So I like to imagine what our communities might look like if the Universal Declaration of Human Rights became the foundation of our common activities and the way we govern. And I like to imagine what it might look like if from a very early age, these human rights were taught as easily as spelling and math in our schools. What if equality, freedom, justice, and respect were taught and reinforced daily in the safety of a caring classroom? What if they were to become the cornerstone of our public education system, which is what Eleanor Roosevelt spent 14 years of her life trying to make happen. I believe it is quite practical to imagine this for our communities and for our schools. I believe that the education of human rights is the single most important step that we can take as a society toward upholding peace and teaching our children how to successfully live together as human beings. We need to educate about these rights and we need to integrate these into our own communities because unless these rights have meaning in our own smaller places, they'll have little meaning anywhere else. There's a very strong wave of human rights education moving across the country right now. And there are, in fact, many classrooms who are embedding the study of human rights into their curriculums. As we consider some of the current world problems, such as climate change, COVID pandemic, gun violence, racial injustice, poverty, the rise of the automated workforce, please consider the incredible outcome when many students are being prompted and encouraged to apply the principles of these rights toward finding solutions to the world's problems. Using art as our base, Columbus Crossing Borders has joined the human rights education movement by working with community organizations and school students on creative projects that encourage critical thinking and meaningful actions in our communities. We are introducing projects that are age appropriate for each classroom, and we work with teachers to integrate activities into current classroom studies, all contained within these principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Shortly before the pandemic began, My husband and I took the Columbus Crossing Borders exhibit and film to visit with elementary school students. We visit with all ages, but these were groups of second and third graders. We talked about the importance of having a home and what it might feel like to suddenly be told you have to leave your home. If you could only carry one thing with you, what would you take? Many of these young people brainstormed about that one thing they might carry with them to help take care of their families and the people they were traveling with. One child said a jug of water. Somebody else said, I'd take a lighter to make fire. Somebody else said a big blanket to keep everybody warm. And others were considering the ways that you might help keep people's spirits up on your journey to stay mentally strong while you're trying to find a new home. We talked about how a community is like a shared home and the many ways we can open our shared homes to new people. We talked about what it means to show kindness and respect to people who may seem different than the people we are familiar with. And then the students participated in a group art project where they created connecting paintings that reflect what we value about our homes and our communities. And they turned this into a visual community quilt. As we encourage this type of critical thinking among kids, seeing how they embrace broader concepts and goals, this is a very uplifting activity because these groups of enthusiastic youngsters were troubleshooting and using creative problem solving about ways we can all generate more unity and peace in our communities. It was a wonderful way to introduce the articles reflected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I have no doubt that discussion left a powerful and lasting impression. Working with these students is a privilege, and the meaningful conversations and projects that we share with them gives me great hope. I'm going to show you just this last image. This is a painting that was created by a student in Westerville. He, along with other high school painting students, had been paired with students who had been refugees, and they were willing to share their own experiences. The student who created this painting is named Taylor Downard. This is what he said about his work. When you look at this painting, what words come to mind? I would say it's fair to assume that one of the first words that comes to mind is foreigner. And in some regards, this is true. This is Sam. Sam was raised in a Nepali refugee camp in Bhutan, and his family moved to the United States when he was 16 years old. Even though in technicality, Sam is a foreigner, he embodies something greater than himself. He is real, not in the sense that he is not imaginary, but in the sense that he is genuine. He is kind. He is humble. He is thankful for the opportunities that he has. He's appreciative of small luxuries in life. Meeting Sam showed me that the term foreigner is just an idea used to separate people from one another. It's the people themselves that are in fact real, and that it is this sense of being real that can transcend color, nationality, and language barriers to bring people together as one. So the question is this: if we really want to remove the barriers of racism and reach hearts and minds with a message of love and compassion, what better place to start than with our school students? Because every one of us needs to learn that we each have a contribution, a voice, to breathe more life into inclusion, equality, and justice. And I think we all need to recognize that we do have the power to make a better difference so that peace can exist among us. Our shared humanity defines this world that we are in. And when there exist 80 million people who are fleeing right now, and we see families torn apart, marginalized, criminalized, only because they come asking for our help, how can we allow ourselves to be bystanders to any misperceptions, lies, and false information that's being spread about them? Because every act we put forth and every omission matters. We can all put forth our tiny ripples of hope. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Laurie. Oh my goodness. And thank you, Mary, for the slides as well, and the timing of them together really drove the message home. When we wanted to leave time for questions and certainly reflections on this, so I'll open the floor to folks, and feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question or want to comment on this incredible presentation.
Laurie, this is Nick Burnett. Welcome to Trinity. I'm delighted that you were able to be part of this series. It's very, very on message, very real is your theme at the tail end of the presentation. I wonder if you could just give us some of the background. I believe your project works with CRIS, Columbus Refugee and Immigration.
Yes.
And you may or may not know that one of the founders of CRIS, Jane McGrew and Mike McGrew, her husband, the late Jane McGrew, her husband Mike was very involved in CRIS. A moment, hi Mike, a moment of just connecting Columbus as this extraordinary, continuously emerging global city. Bhutanese, Somalis, Central American, South American, Mexican communities. If you could just give us a little of the data on that and your interaction with CRIS, not to turn it into a sociology class, but.
Yes. When I first started doing this project, one of the board members on CRIS got wind of it, and he knew what was going to be happening because this was at the end of 2016, and he was knowledgeable about what was about to happen in terms of travel bans and the 7 countries that were going to be kept from sending people here. And he knew that CRIS was going to be in trouble. And he was very encouraged. And he's the one who actually inspired me to make the film. And the film includes a number of people who work for CRIS, who speak about their experiences as refugees. As a result, we developed a partnership. And in fact, they come to almost all of our events that are local. We do a lot out of town too, but we're going to be having, right before the pandemic started, my husband and I copied every painting. We had it professionally copied so that we could sell the originals and raise money for CRIS. And we had planned on having a huge art auction. And it was going to be held at the Cultural Arts Center, but we had to cancel it, of course, because of the pandemic. But we will still be doing that. And we do a lot of projects that help support CRIS, and they support us. And the way Angie Plummer put it, who's the director of CRIS, she said, when I'm in my meetings and I'm looking around my boardroom, everybody's on the same page. We're all here for the same reasons. But she says, Laurie, the work you're doing with Columbus Crossing Borders is you're bridging the general public with the work we are doing, and it's all about education. As a matter of fact, Mary has a very short video she could share if there was time. It's just 2 minutes that actually shows the work that we do.
You want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's pictures of CRIS in there too.
Sorry, I'm a little behind here when I close out. I'll go to the...
As we work to help those whose lives have been uprooted by violence, climate, and poverty, the Columbus Crossing Borders outreach includes a deep commitment to human rights education. This commitment is the basis of many of our Columbus Crossing Borders activities and community partnerships, knowing that every one of us has the ability to contribute to the greater good of our world through the upholding of human rights. The Columbus Crossing Borders Project meets with schools, organizations, and students of all ages to engage in conversations and creative projects that point to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Through art, we find a creative approach for sharing this vital document and its principles of inclusion, equality, and justice that help to bring about peace in our everyday lives. These group projects produce remarkable displays of painting, poetry, mural making, theater, music, and journaling, all pointing to our goals to live together successfully as human beings. And through such projects that feature our human rights, we can see how, in a nurturing and caring environment, such meaningful activity can reinforce positive views of self, respect for others, and a strong sense of responsibility toward our communities.
So on our website, we also have, and we're going to have a new website come up very soon. And Chris has contributed several different films to educate people about not only what the work is that Chris does, but about their creation, the creation of Chris and how it came about.
Laurie, thank you very much for that. I hope that there might be a seed planted for Trinity to think about ways when we re-enter and regather that we can be directly connected with this project.
Thank you.
That's for others to take on, but I really think that part of this Lenten series is a seed planting experience. We're casting seed into some pretty fierce landscapes, and it would be easy for us to be like the practitioner who said, you know, I really go into my bubble when I'm done with whatever it is I do, 9 to 5 or, you know, 8 to 8 or whatever it is that we do. We work hard, but you know, caring about the whole of God's creation is at the heart of discipleship, and I think you'll find a lot of partners at Trinity.
Great.
Morning, Deacon Craig here. More of a comment than a question, but I appreciated your discussion of Mother Teresa. I don't remember the exact quote, where we just all need to do our small part with great love. And I'm reminded of another good Episcopalian, George H.W. Bush, when he was president over 30 years ago, talked about 1,000 points of light. And, you know, as opposed to, he might have been making the argument the government shouldn't be spending money where many of us think the government should still spend money, even with us doing our small part. But I've always really liked that idea that most of us are not going to be a Martin Luther King or a Kennedy or a John F. Kennedy or a Robert Kennedy or a Mother Teresa, but we can all have that great love you talked about. So I appreciated that reference you had.
Thank you.
I'd like to mention a comment. This is Mike McGrew. Laurie, thank you
Hi.
for your telling us about the project and everything. And thank Dick for the introduction, for saying what I didn't need to say, but how supportive I have been of Chris. And of course, Jane was the founder. And how you probably didn't see my reaction, but I was so excited when I saw Angie Plunger on one of your slides and the refugees and her staff that were represented and their art. I recognize all that already, but I hadn't followed up with the Columbus border crossing. So I'm really glad to hear about this through you. And there's so many national organizations I thought it'd be worth mentioning, like Church World Service is one, for example. And the Episcopal Relief and Development Fund, I'm not sure how much they're focused on this area, but I thought that was worth investigating and seeing as Episcopalians might be able to get more involved in that level also. And I'll stop now because there's so many other things we could go into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, just one more Episcopal commercial for a second. Episcopal Migration Ministries had a very close relationship with Chris, and then through the vagaries of bureaucracy, nothing other than that, just a change of presiding administration and bishop and bureaucracy, that contract ended. And I don't know what the logic of it was, but the commitment of Episcopalians to migration ministry in cities like Columbus did not end. So I hope there's renewal and this opportunity. Again, we never can do this alone. We can't even do it bilaterally. We have to do it in an interreligious, no doubt about it. But you know, the Episcopal Migration Ministries is a program that's nearly as old as Episcopal Relief and Development, which used to be known as the Presiding Bishop's Fund for World Relief. Those of you who, you know, go back a ways and, you know, but it's all interconnected. And just because the bureaucracy sort of tripped up one season doesn't mean we're out of it. Angie would be able to give you chapter and verse on that. And she still talks with us. So everybody's happy.
I hope so.
Laurie, when does the virtual exhibit, when is that going to be available for people to see?
In a matter of days, and it's free. It's going to be free to the public, so you can walk through the tour on your computer. And in light of what is it Mike just said, we're going to have a resource list of some of the places you can contact if you move to help in any way. There's so many people we have partnered with, and he mentioned a couple, like the World Church Organization. Chris works with them, but we've partnered with so many different entities, and that's going to be listed on our virtual tour.
So Stacy, it looked like you put the link to Columbus Crossing Borders in the chat. So
Yeah.
Is that where they would enter the?
If you go there now, you're going to see the website before the new website is, I was hoping to have the new website up before we met today and before the talk I gave last week to another group, but it's got to be just right. So we're still editing it and making sure everything is working properly. But we've spent 6 months on this new website, and that's where the virtual tour will be. So what happens is many times we'll be contacted by schools or churches or refugee groups from across the United States that would like to bring us, or community efforts that like to bring the tour, but it costs money to travel. So in the situation where somebody can't afford to bring us, they're going to have the tour there for free, and it's not the same as seeing it as in person, but it's a good alternative. So yes, it'll be within a matter of, I'd like to say 1 to 2 weeks. It's going to be up.
And once that goes live, Laurie, we'll include a link to that in our e-chimes so that folks can step in to the art gallery and take a tour.
And the film too is always available. If you go on the website, you can access the film. It's on Vimeo. It costs $5, which just goes toward the director. That's, you know, one of the ways he gets paid. But the film, it features everything about Columbus Crossing Borders Project, including the art exhibit and how it came about. And Angie is a strong presence. Angie and Chris is strong presence in the film.
And we might be using that film, a little teaser, as one of our movie nights in the near future. So there's an opportunity to watch that beforehand and then come together for discussion. So I have not viewed it yet, but I know it's a 50-minute documentary. So I'm
It's
looking forward to
short.
it.
I mean, it's an hour at the most. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say how impressed Carol and I are with all that you've done, Laurie, and Dick's comment about planting seeds. With the work with children, it really is planting seeds, because they're the twigs that need to be bent so the tree will grow in the right direction, and that is not happening in a lot of places.
No.
The comments that I hear when we used to be in supermarket lines about some of the refugees and the multicultural people in our area of the world, New Jersey, would curl your hair. And it's prompted me to make comments directly to people about how your ancestors were refugees too, probably, and how dare you speak that way. How are you doing with, or how is the movement doing with getting other places around the country, like New Jersey and elsewhere, to do this same sort of thing?
For lack of time, I wish I could elaborate, but I can't. But it's just to say that when I started doing this, I didn't realize how this was going to keep me uplifted, meeting like-minded people and the movement, because we encounter resistance, and we're not just trying to reach out to people that are supportive. We're trying to change hearts and get past the toxic discourse that's going on. But it's happening, and we're reaching people. And for example, Catholic Charities down in Southern Ohio bought the rights to show our film to 11 school districts in 3 states. And that's what movements are doing across the country. There's a huge, we've even been in contact with the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center, and we're working with a group out in San Francisco. So there's a lot of hopefulness out there, but there's so much resistance and so much misinformation and so much fear-based propaganda going on. So it's a delicate situation, because you can't get political, but it's a hot political topic. And so we're just trying to keep it humanitarian.
Stacy, would it be possible to, Laurie too, to put your contact email into the chat?
Absolutely.
And, Fred, if that way you could contact each other, and maybe you have contacts, schools that would like to buy that film or something like that.
And we travel. Who knows? With the pandemic, I'm getting my first shot next week, but who knows how long this is going on, but eventually we'll be traveling again. But in the meantime, we're meeting with schools online. We're doing online projects. So, and not just schools, community entities of all sorts.
That's
so
wonderful.
Yes, my contact information is out there. Yeah, you feel free to share it. Yeah.
I just copied and pasted your email address, as well as the Columbus Crossing Borders Project website link in the chat. So copy it down or copy and paste it, and you can certainly contact me, and I can forward you Laurie's contact information as well. So this formation class is recorded and will be up on our website. So if there's someone who you think would want to hear this, feel free to share this formation class with them, and we will be recording all of them from this point forward on our Fierce Landscapes conversation. Laurie, deep gratitude to you for all you are doing and for being here with us today. And Mary, thank you so much for making the connection and opening this door to our community. So
my pleasure.
Thank you.